Hi, welcome to English 104, your first entirely online class. I hope that it's going to work out for everyone. So today we're going to look at the idea of character, particularly through the reading Cinderella. This lecture will introduce the idea of character and look at a variety of character and character traits. We will also describe direct and indirect characterization, define heroes and villains, protagonists and antagonists, major and minor characters, round versus flat characters, dynamic versus static characters, and we will define and describe archetypes, caricatures, and stereotypes. This image, taken from the textbook, shows Dickens dreaming or haunted by his multiple characters, each trying to find their life through his work. Author Elie Wiesel describes himself as practically possessed by characters who force the writer to tell their stories because they want to get out. As readers, characters give us a reason to care about the story. Well-developed characters become very human to us. So what is a character? A character is very simply the someone or the who of the story. That often sticks with us long after we've forgotten all the other details of the story. I would like you to take a moment now and go into the discussion forum and post a character that stands out for you and explain why. Write a brief description. It can be either from a book, a film, or a television program. But tell us why that character, what it is about that character that makes them so memorable. A character is a personage in any literary work who acts, appears, or is referred to as playing a part. Generally, this is a person, but it could refer to a machine, an animal, an alien, a monster, elves, etc. You get the idea. The textbook gives us a character checklist, things to consider when analyzing a character. The character's name or lack of name, like in Sunny's Blues or in Cinderella. The evil stepmother is never given a name. We need to think about what that means. Also, sometimes the name can be significant in itself, like Sunny in Sunny's Blues, and how we looked at the different meanings and iterations of the word sunny. The next thing to look at or to consider is the character's physical appearance. We are told in Sunny's Blues that Sunny has a bright open face full of copper and that Cinderella is very beautiful despite her clothes. So these kinds of things, these kinds of details. Objects and places associated with the character. For example, in Cinderella, we often associate her with her glass slippers. What do you think is the significance of the glass slippers? Could possibly be because the glass allows us to see what's actually inside. And what's inside is just as beautiful for Cinderella as what's on the outside. Seeing past her cinder look. The next thing to consider is the character's actions. What does a character do? And often this is more important, or one of the most important ways to get to know them. This connects to the idea of the unreliable narrator. We talked about that in class the other day, in which a person's actions can sometimes say more than their words. The next thing to think about is the character's thoughts and words, including the content, what they say or think, the timing about when they speak or talk or think, phrasing, how they think or speak. We can learn a lot of the character through what other people think or say about them. For example, look at this short clip that's going to follow from Mean Girls and see how Katie, Janice, and Damien describe the plastics.
Of course, all the plastics are in the same gym class. Who are the plastics?
They're teen royalty. If North Shore was Us Weekly, they would always be on the cover.
That one there, that's Karen Smith. She is one of the dumbest girls you will ever meet. Damien sat next to her in English last year.
She asked me how to spell orange.
And that little one, that's Gretchen Wieners.
She's totally rich because her dad invented toaster strudel.
Gretchen Wieners knows everybody's business. She knows everything about everyone.
That's why her hair is so big. It's full of secrets.
Hey, what's happening?
And evil takes a human form in Regina George. Don't be fooled, because she may seem like your typical selfish, but in reality, she is so much more than that.
She's the queen bee, the star. Those other two are just her little workers.
Regina George. How do I even begin to explain Regina George?
Regina George is flawless. She has 2 Fendi purses and a silver Lexus.
I hear her hair is insured for $10,000.
I hear she does car commercials in Japan.
Her favorite movie is Varsity Blues.
One time she met John Stamos on a plane.
And he told her she was pretty.
One time, she punched me in the face. It was awesome.
She always looks fierce. She always wins Spring Fling Queen.
Who cares?
And finally, the narrator's comments about the character. Characterization is the process by which an author reveals the personality of a character. This can be direct or indirect. Watch this short video that describes direct or indirect characterization.
Created using Powtoon.
Let's talk about some different types of characters and some terms that you will need to know. A lot of this will probably be review for you. Heroes and villains seems pretty straightforward, and typically or historically the hero has been the good guy and the villain has been the bad guy. Heroes or heroines are generally the leading character in a story. They are generally larger than life and stronger, better, and sometimes godlike, with qualities that we should admire or try to emulate. It is clear that Cinderella is the heroine of the story and the evil stepmother is the villain. We will examine the evil stepmother's motivations in a bit. Modern literature, though, tends to be less clear about these divisions, and so we have taken to referring to them as the protagonist and the antagonist, which simply means the leading character and their opponent. The use of the term protagonist and antagonist tend to remove the ideas of virtue and are more neutral. However, it's important to note that a character can be both a protagonist and a hero, such as Harry Potter. Harry Potter possesses the hero-like qualities that we're used to seeing, but he is also the protagonist of the story. And it's also worth noting that in some stories, it's difficult to pin the protagonist to only one character. For example, me harping on Sunny's Blues again, but in Sunny's Blues, is Sunny or his brother the protagonist, or both? Likewise, without the idea of virtue, who is the protagonist or the antagonist in Girl? The speaker or the girl? Another area of consideration is the anti-hero. This character seems to possess traits opposite to the hero. They may be difficult to like or admire. Instead of being courageous and determined, they might appear to be timid, hypersensitive, and indecisive. The anti-hero usually comes around in the end, and an example of this would be Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. Before we leave the idea of hero, let's take a look at this video by Matthew Winkler as he describes the hero's journey.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth, or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely, but let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo? Well, you're human, just like them. The hero's journey myth exists in all human cultures and keeps getting updated because we humans reflect on our world through symbolic stories of our own lives. You leave your comfort zone, have an experience that transforms you, and then you recover and do it again. You don't literally slay dragons or fight Voldemort, but you face problems just as scary. Joseph Campbell said, "In the cave you fear to enter lies the treasure you seek. What is the symbolic cave you fear to enter? Auditions for the school play? Baseball tryouts? Love? Watch for this formula in books, movies, and TV shows you come across. You will certainly see it again, but also be sensitive to it in your own life. Listen for your call to adventure. Accept the challenge. Conquer your fear and claim the treasure you seek. And then, do it all over again.
Now let's look at major versus minor characters. The protagonist or the hero is usually the major character, but in addition to being the major character in the story, in addition to there being major characters in the story, there will be what's referred to as minor characters. Even though these characters seem less prominent and are often called filler characters, they play an important role in the plot of the story and the character development of the protagonist and or the antagonist. One of the easiest examples to see is Rue in The Hunger Games. She certainly is a character that we come to love and has many virtues to admire in her own right, but she plays an important role in the development of Katniss's character as well, particularly in terms of Katniss's motivation in The Hunger Games. Rue would be considered a minor character, even though she's memorable. She helps fill out that major character role. In Cinderella, the story would fall flat without the sisters. They don't play a huge role, but they do help us to understand Cinderella and create some sympathy for that character. What character do you see as a minor character in Sunny's Blues? A short quiz will appear on the screen for you to answer this question. Characters can also be known as flat or round. A round character is one that acts from varied, often conflicting motives, impulses, and desires, and seems to have some psychological complexity. In the story of Cinderella, most of the characters, apart from Cinderella, seem pretty flat. However, if you're familiar with the Disney movie version of Cinderella, the stepmother would also be considered a round character because we get to know her desires, and she has some psychological complexity. The character of Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean films would be a round character, as he often has conflicting motives and impulses. He struggles to be good, but his bad side just keeps coming out. Another great example of a round character would be Hermione Granger in the Harry Potter series. Arguably, throughout the books, Hermione changes the most of the three friends, as she grows emotionally and mentally throughout the story. Flat characters are those who are simple, one-dimensional, who behave and speak in predictable ways. They are not necessarily bad characters, but they lack complexity. A great example of a flat character would be the sister in Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour, which is next on our reading list, or the character of Filch in the Harry Potter films. Flat characters are those who are simple, one-dimensional, who behave and speak in a predictable way. They are not necessarily, like I said, bad characters. They're just not complicated. Filch always does the same thing. He always has the same reactions. That's what makes him a flat character. Just because a character is flat doesn't make them uninteresting, though. In addition to being predictable, flat characters often have one or two traits that make them stand out. As the book illustrates, Kenny from South Park is a flat character, but the fact that Kenny continually dies does make him flat in his predictability, but also funny and interesting. Flat and round characters often work together. Can you think of any pairs of characters where one is flat and another is round? Post your answers in the discussion forum and explain why you think this, and perhaps why they work so well together. Similar to round and flat characters, you can also see dynamic versus static characters. Quite simply, a character that changes is dynamic, and a character that remains the same is static. Don't confuse round with dynamic. A character can be round and not be dynamic. For example, Sherlock Holmes is a round character. He's very interesting and complex, but he never changes. His wit, intelligence, confidence, and quirks make him a round character, but the fact that he never changes makes him static. Louise Mallard, in The Story of an Hour, is a dynamic character, as we'll see her change once she learns about her, spoiler alert, husband's death and begins to dream of freedom. Likewise with the narrator in Sonny's Blues. One way to think about dynamic versus static characters is to think about Drax the Destroyer and Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. Groot is constant. We don't see any development or change in his character. He's a good character, he's a good guy, he's interesting and we love him, but we don't see any major shift. I am Groot. Whereas we do see a major shift in Drax the Destroyer's desire to help save the planet and to become less selfish. Take a look at this video, which explains various character traits. Before we leave the idea of character in literature, I want to briefly discuss the idea of stereotype, caricature, and archetype. A stereotype is a widely held and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing, such as the jock or the nerd. It's old, but the movie The Breakfast Club plays with the idea of stereotype, as each of the students represents a different type of high school student. The pictures of Obama and Trump show the exaggeration of Obama's chin and his ears and his big smile, whereas, again, with Trump, his hair and his chin are emphasized. Moving on to archetype. An archetype is defined as a very typical example of a certain person or thing. An archetype is a recurrent symbol or motif that occurs over and over and over in literature, art, and mythology, and across cultures. The archetype is an idea, image, or symbol that forms part of the collective unconsciousness. Carl Jung did a lot of work on archetypes and mapped the basic archetypes. There are common archetypes across all cultures, and these include, but are not limited to, the orphan, the hero, the jester or the trickster figure, the wise man or what is referred to as the sage, and the mother. My research has been on the mother. Contrary to popular belief, the archetype can be both good and bad. The great mother archetype is comprised of both the terrible mother and the good mother. In the story of Cinderella, we see both types of mothers. We see the fairy godmother who helps Cinderella get ahead, and we see the stepmother who is dedicated to keeping her down. And it's interesting because if you looked at Cinderella from the point of view of the mother, the stepmother, she might actually be a good mother to her own daughters as she's protecting their interest, but she's not a good mother to Cinderella. This is central to the idea of archetype, that the mother, the great mother archetype, contains both the terrible and the good, and is comprised of both. In literature, the mother can be seen in representations of the actual mother or in images of fertility, redemption, feelings of devotion, and awe. The archetype of mother or motherhood is also seen in the idea of transformation. I think it's symbolic that in Sonny's Blues, it is the two mother characters, Sonny's mother and the narrator's wife, who work towards the reconciliation of the brothers. In Cinderella, the fairy godmother is responsible for the transformation of Cinderella into someone who is fit to attend the ball. you have some understanding of the terminology in terms of character, and that this will help you in the analysis of literature that we are looking at, but also to formulate a discussion both in class and outside in your regular life when you want to talk about movies or things like that. Think back to the character that you posted or will post on the discussion forum. Have you changed your mind about what makes them interesting or memorable? Are they static or dynamic? Do they represent an archetype? Are they major or minor character? In the next lecture, we'll discuss the short story, The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. And we'll do some exercises on character analysis. As this lecture closes, you'll see a short quiz that you will need to complete. This will act as a review of the content we have covered. Just a quick note on assignments. The group doing the wiki post for the story of the hour should post the author biographical information and the historical and social context information in the wiki on Moodle, and the key terms and course notes will be given in the next recorded lecture. Thank you.